In this week's Dreamweaver tutorial, we'll continue learning about the basic structure of a web page and the underlying HTML code that gives a web browser the information it needs to properly display the content of that page. If you remember from last week, we experimented with changing the look and feel of a web page by changing style attributes in an external style sheet. This week we'll take a closer look at some other style attributes that web designers commonly use and how to revise those attributes to change the appearance of a page. Some of these attributes are fairly complex and the CSS file can look pretty intimidating in code view. But the good news is that this time around we'll be using Dreamweaver to create the style sheet for us. And that means no more writing code in Notepad. One of the best ways to learn about how websites use CSS is to simply take a look at the HTML code for a given page. One of the things I like most about browsers is that they allow you to take a peek at the underlying HTML code of any page you can find on the web. If you haven't tried this already, next time you are visiting a web page, see if your browser provides a View Source option. In most browsers, this can be found simply by right-clicking on a web page or Control-click on a Mac and then selecting View Source. Just a word of warning, most sites you'll find on the web today are fairly complex, and the underlying HTML code will certainly reveal this. But don't let these sites intimidate you. This is an advanced level of coding done by experienced website designers. You may want to pursue this type of web design in the future, but for this course, we'll be concentrating on a more simple page structure. So what does page structure mean exactly? To help you get a better idea of what I'm talking about, I'd like you to first download and save to your computer a sample web page for us to examine. You'll find a link to this document just below. Please save this HTML file to the same root directory you created on your computer last week. It should be located in the same folder as your index.html file. I also want you to download and save 2 images to your computer. You'll find a link to these images below. Please save these 2 image files to the Images folder in your root directory. Now let's take a look at the web page together, and I'll point out the different components that make up the page structure of this file. Notice in the code view that the page begins with much of the same information you placed in your first assignment for this course. The document type declaration or doc type tag, the root element or HTML tag, the beginning head tag, and the character set tag, which is similar to the tag you placed in your CSS file. What might appear new to you in this example is the title tag. The text you enter here will appear at the top of a browser window and in some cases in the results of a search engine. Notice the closing head tag here. Next on the page is the opening body tag, which you also used in your first assignment. Remember that everything we place between the opening and closing body tags will be the content of our page. One way we can help a browser understand what to do with our content is to label different sections with their own unique tags. The tags will alert the browser to look in the external style sheet or CSS file to find specific instructions on how it should display everything you've placed between those tags. Later, when we create those instructions in your CSS file, they will look something like this. In this web page sample, the first tag we see is called a div tag named wrapper. Some web page designers like to use wrapper tags to tell a browser things like the exact width of a page, the background color that should appear within those margins, and a variety of other attributes that might apply to the overall look of a website. The next tag we see is called a header tag. Just as the name implies, this tag refers to the top area of our web page. As with all tags, the header tag will direct a browser to the external style sheet to find specific instructions for how this area of the web page should look. Located within the header tag is another unique tag that tells a browser how to display larger than normal text, like text that might appear at the top of a page or at the beginning of a paragraph. It's called a heading tag, or H tag for short, and is most commonly used to indicate a range of text sizes, from H1 to H6. Also within the header tag is another tag called the navigation tag, or nav tag for short. We can use the nav tag to tell a browser exactly how to display a navigation area on our web page and how the links in that menu or set of tabs should behave. In this example, the navigation area includes text links that take visitors to different pages of the website and even different locations on a specific page. The UL and LI tags you see here are called list tags, and these can be used to give a browser specific instructions about how to display links in a menu. Notice the closing tags here. Every tag we use on a website must have an opening tag and a closing tag. If either one of these tags is missing, the browser will have no idea what to do with the content. As you look through the remaining code, you'll find a variety of tags that mark different sections of the page. Here's a div tag that applies to all the paragraphs that visitors will be reading on this page. And here's a tag called an article tag, which applies only to the first paragraph. As you can see, this example includes a lot of different tags located throughout the HTML code. But have you noticed in the display view how awkward and unformatted this page still appears? Remember that tags are nothing more than simple markers or labels that direct a browser to a style sheet for more specific information. The problem here is that no one has yet created an external style sheet for this page. The markers or tags are all in place, but now we need to create that external style sheet that will include specific instructions for each tag. We'll create that style sheet using a new feature in Dreamweaver called CSS Designer. However, before we get started, I want you to first delete the CSS file you created last week. We won't be needing that file anymore, since the CSS Designer in Dreamweaver will help us create a new style sheet for our web page. To get started with the CSS Designer, go to the top menu of Dreamweaver and click Window, and then CSS Designer. In the top section labeled Sources, click the plus sign here, and then select Create a new CSS file. In the Create a new CSS file dialog box, click the Browse button to open the Save Style Sheet As dialog box. Now find the CSS folder you created last week in your local root directory. If you don't already have a CSS folder here, you can create a new folder now. Now select the CSS folder and click Open. Let's name our new style sheet Style01 in the File Name text field. Then click Save. This returns us to the previous dialog box, which should now look like this. Notice that Dreamweaver now knows where our style sheet is located. Be sure the Add as Link option is selected. Now click OK again. Notice that the first thing Dreamweaver did is place a new tag in the HTML code of our web page. The information in this tag tells a web browser exactly where to locate the external style sheet, which, as we know, is in the CSS folder of our root directory. Also notice that Dreamweaver shows our new style sheet listed in the Sources panel over here. Now it's time to start adding specific instructions in our style sheet to let a browser know what to do with our page content. In Dreamweaver language, these instructions are called rules. First, go to your HTML code and select the particular tag you want to work with. Then make sure your style sheet is selected in the Sources pane of CSS Designer. Next, go down to the Selectors pane and click the plus button here. In the Selectors pane, notice that Dreamweaver shows the style tag we selected in our HTML code. Next, hit Enter, and you should see a long list of possible attributes that we can apply. Keep in mind that we'll likely apply only a few of the attributes shown here to any given tag in our HTML code. So we'll need to be selective and choose only the attributes that are related to what we're trying to accomplish. For example, let's say we want to use the wrapper tag to define the width of our web page to be exactly 800 pixels. Under the Layout heading, select Width, then Pixels, and then enter 800. Be sure to press Enter on your keyboard to make the change. Now let's see if Dreamweaver correctly added this attribute to our external style sheet. And yes, there it is. Now notice in the display view that the text is more evenly aligned with the photo. Now let's add a background color. In the Properties pane, scroll down to the section labeled Background. Here you can enter an exact color name by its hexadecimal format, and we'll talk more about web colors in a later module, or you can choose a color from a color graph that Dreamweaver provides. Let's try the color graph, and choose a color simply by clicking around. Once you've found a color you like, click the plus sign here to add this color as a swatch. Now let's see if we can make some changes to the text on this page. The large font before each paragraph looks awkward to me, so I'll change the font face to something more attractive. Notice in the HTML code that the first headline, Bayside Beat, appears to be inside two H1 tags. So that's the property or rule that I need to define in my style sheet. First click the plus sign here and then enter the letter H. Notice that Dreamweaver displays a number of different choices here for the type of H tag you are working with. I want to change the H1 tag, so I'll select that option. Now I'll scroll through the different properties available and try to find the option for changing the font face. And here it is. Since I'm not exactly sure what font face I want, I'll simply try one of the fonts listed here. And while I'm here, I'll also change the color to something like this. Now let's take a look at our external style sheet and see what Dreamweaver has been adding to that file. Here we can see that Dreamweaver has added all the necessary instructions for the changes that I just made. We could easily spend hours here adding and revising style sheet properties to get the look we want. But I'm going to let you take over from here. For this week's Dreamweaver assignment, I want you to download and save the sample web page to your local root directory, and then complete the following tasks. 1. Just as I did earlier, use Dreamweaver CSS Designer to create an external style sheet and save that document inside a folder named CSS in your local root directory. You can name the style sheet file anything you like, but you might want to consider calling it something like styles.css. 2. Use the CSS Designer to create rules for at least 3 of the tags located in the sample web page you downloaded. You may want to replay the earlier part of this video where I created rules for the wrapper and the H1 tag. 3. Submit a copy of your CSS style sheet to me for grading. As I mentioned earlier, I'd like to see at least 3 different CSS rules defined in your style sheet. And finally, 4. Experiment with the CSS Designer. See how many different changes you can make to the appearance of this sample web page by creating rules and applying properties. Don't worry if you break anything. You can always download and save a fresh copy of the sample web page and start over. Good luck, and I'll be looking forward to seeing your work.